Hey there, everybody. My name is Conrad Iacobellis, and welcome to... Okay, I actually don't have a name for this, and I don't know if there's going to be a name, but I know you're sitting there anyway saying, do we really need another true crime paranormal show from a millennial white dude with a beard? And the answer to that is probably no, but I'm going to give you one anyway. Now, I have loved everything spooky ever since I was a kid. I remember going to my elementary school library and renting out any ghost books I could find. It actually got to a point where the librarian would go and buy ghost books for me and just give them to me. And that kind of evolved into me then becoming a member of the Goosebumps fan club and watching Are You Afraid of the Dark and The Twilight Zone and Tales of the Crypt. And now that I say that, that probably explains a lot that I need to talk to my therapist about. This love for everything spooky eventually transformed into a curiosity that I had. And once I could get on the internet, I would search hours and hours and hours on the internet, looking up any paranormal stories, looking up ghost stories. I remember going on E-Bombs World and Albino Black Sheep, and probably a couple websites that I should have been using a VPN for, just searching for anything I could find that was ghost, true crime, just spooky related. So this show is really going to be a love letter to kid Conrad. To Conrad, who used to read hours and hours of ghost stories, used to look at all the ghost books as a kid, and who was obsessed with it. As an adult, I am going to now, see if I believe in what I loved as a kid. Obviously, this is going to be really true for a lot of paranormal stories because, true crime, even though that didn't really come as a passion until later in life. Really, when I got into last podcast on the left, I still want to run down some true crime stories because it's fun, but there won't be as much if I believe in it or not because, it's true crime. So I thought, what better way to kick off, insert the name of whatever show this is going to be, with a story that is true crime, but also kind of hangs on the edge of paranormal as well. If you've done any digging around the paranormal world, you've most likely come upon this story before. And today we're going to take a look at the Hinterkaifeck murders. I want to just say, I'm uncultured and unsophisticated and grew up in the American education system, so I don't speak German. I did my best to learn how to pronounce some of these names and words that I'm going to be reading, but if I mispronounce something, I am terribly sorry. I am not doing it on purpose. Our story begins in 1922 in the... Okay. I'm not gonna be doing that voice. This was supposed to be a gag that I thought doing it would be funny, but now that I'm actually doing it, I don't know if it's funny, but if you got a kick out of it, thank you very much. Basically, if you're sitting there saying, what the heck is he making fun of? And a lot of ghost videos, countdowns or whatever, the person talks kind of nasally and down. And so it was a gag to kind of make fun of me making a video like this, but I don't know if it's funny anymore. Our story is going to begin in 1922 on an isolated farmstead known as Hinterkaifeck that is just outside the small German town of Bavaria. The Hinterkaifeck farm was owned by the Gruber family and located approximately 70 kilometers north of Munich. The Gruber family included 63-year-old Andreas, his 72-year-old wife Cecilia, their 35-year-old daughter Victoria, and Victoria's two children, 7-year-old Cecilia, whom I'm going to refer to as young Cecilia, and 2-year-old Joseph. There was also a maid helping out the family, 44-year-old Maria Baumgartner, who actually started on March 31st and replaced the previous maid, but we'll get into that later. Now, if you've looked at the title of the video, it's called the Hinterkaifeck Murders, and I just said, hey, there's a family on the Hinterkaifeck farm. Spoilers, I would love to say that the Gruber family was a fantastic family, but they're gonna get murdered. But also there's some dark mysteries behind the family as well. We're gonna give a little prologue to the family history, starting with Victoria. You see, Victoria is a widow, and her first husband, Carl Gabriel, had died a decade before in World War I. Also, it's a mystery behind who the father of her son Joseph is. But we're going to dive more into the family history later on after we find out about what happens to the family first. On April 1st, neighbors became concerned when young Cecilia missed school for several days and the entire family failed to show up to church on Sunday. Now, besides routinely showing up at church, Victoria was also a member of the church choir, so her missing church was kind of a red flag. Also on April 1st, there were two coffee sellers, Hans Shravoski and Edward Shravoski, who arrived at the Hinterkaifeck farm to take an order for the family. When no one responded to them knocking on the door into the window, the two coffee salesmen decided to go look on the farm to see if they could find the family. Now, searching around the farm, the two coffee salesmen didn't find any members of the family. The only thing that they noticed was that the gate to the machine house was open before they decided to leave. They also did say that they noticed that all the farm animals were alive and well. On April 4th, assembler Albert Hoffner actually went to Hinterkaifeck to fix the engine of the food chopper for the family. Hoffner waited around an hour before going to fix the food chopper, and he actually decided to do it. He didn't hear anything from the family, but he decided to go work on the food chopper because he heard the dog barking in the barn. He also heard all the farm animals on, well, the farm. With no one hearing or seeing anything of the Gruber family, neighbor and farmer Lorenz Scheitenbauer sent his sons Johann and his stepson Joseph to see if they could make contact with the family on the farm. So Johann and Joseph went on the farm, and they later came back to Lorenz and reported that they didn't see anything of the family. So Lorenz decided to lead a search party to Hinterkaifeck. The party was Lorenz, Michael Pohl, and Jacob Sigel. And there, those three men would find every single member of the Gruber family brutally murdered. Viewer discretion is advised. I'm about to get into the brutality of the murders, so if you get upset easily, you may want to skip or just end the video here. In the barn, the search party found 4 brutally battered bodies covered with hay. These were the bodies of Andreas, Cecilia, Victoria, and young Cecilia. The elder Cecilia showed signs of strangulation and 7 blows to the head, which left her with a cracked skull. The face of Andreas was caked in blood, and his cheekbones protruded from shredded flesh. Victoria's skull was also smashed, with her head showing 9 star-shaped wounds, and the right side of her face had been hit with a blunt object. The family likely died instantly from these expertly delivered blows from a mattock or a pickaxe-like tool. However, young Cecilia had a much more terrible fate than her grandparents and mother. You see, young Cecilia's lower jaw had been shattered and her face and neck were covered in gaping circular wounds. There was also evidence to suggest that young Cecilia may have lived hours after her attack in pain and agony. The day after the discovery of the bodies, court physician Johann Baptist Amuller performed autopsies in the barn, and he did find that young Cecilia had ripped out chunks of hair around her. Joseph and Maria were found inside the farmhouse and suffered similar fates to those found in the barn. Maria was killed by crosswise blows to the head in her chambers, and Joseph by a heavy blow to the face while lying in his cot. Eerily, just like the bodies found in the barn, Joseph and Maria were covered as well. Maria was covered with her sheets, and young Joseph was covered with one of his mother's dresses. This is where things start to get a little creepy. Every member of the Gruber family was brutally murdered, except for the family's watchdog and all the animals on the farm. Albert Hoffner stated he heard the family's dog barking in the barn, and Hoffner and both of the coffee salesmen said that they saw all of the farm animals alive and well, and, well, making farm animal noises. Chillingly, as well as being alive, the farm animals had also been taken care of and fed for the several days that the family was murdered. Now that we know how the Gruber family was murdered, let's look into some of the very strange circumstances surrounding their death. To say that the investigation was poorly executed wouldn't be far from the truth. It's not because the police botched the investigation. They actually did as well as they could given their circumstances. It's because, well, crime scene technology is in its infancy in 1922, and the crime scene had been incredibly contaminated from Lorenz and the search party. Inspector George Reingruber and his colleagues from the Munich Police Department investigated as well as they could, But initial investigations were hampered by Lorenz and the search party because the search party had moved the bodies and items around, and they had even cooked and eaten meals in the kitchen. And given how contaminated the crime scene was due to the search party, the Hinterkaifeck murders were doomed to be solved from the beginning. I am not going to be naming every single suspect that there is for the case. I wanted to try to, make this as condensed and understandable as possible. I wanted to give the facts that I believe lend credibility to the case. There are a lot of suspects for the Hinterkaifeck murders. Some of these suspects, they're kind of automatically canceled out because there's a lot of hearsay, and really there's not a lot of evidence to support some of the suspects going forward. The Munich police proceeded with the investigations, and they wanted to start with their prime suspect, Lorenz. I mentioned how there was a mystery behind Joseph's father. Well, there is a theory that suggests that Lorenz is in fact Joseph's dad. At one point, Victoria and Lorenz were in a relationship. This is truth. And it is said that they referred to Joseph as their child. Now, I don't know if Lorenz was just saying that because, I think we've all met a step-parent who refers to their non-blood child as their child because that's how they see them. The relationship of Victoria and Lorenz didn't last long at all due to interference from Andreas. There are a lot of theories and motives of why Lorenz could have been the killer. These theories were bolstered by the fact that those who were in the search party with Lorenz found his behavior suspicious. The search party said that when Lorenz had uncovered the bodies, he acted nonchalant. He viewed and handled the bodies without signs of repulsion. Lorenz actually had a key to the front door of the farmhouse, and that's not too weird to think that he had it if him and Victoria were in a relationship. The weird part is that he used the key immediately after finding the 4 bodies in the barn and went to go enter the farmhouse alone, despite his friends Michael and Jacob being with him at the time. Michael and Jacob had actually questioned Lorenz why he was entering the farmhouse because for all they know, the murderer could still be on the farm. Lorenz responded with, though, he's going to look for his son. Now, I'm going to play devil's advocate right now for Lorenz because, he seems highly suspicious. However, I am going to say that trauma is one hell of a drug. And what I mean by that is you could probably put a bunch of people in the same situation and they will all react to it differently depending on how they react to trauma. I know that there are some people who in high traumatic situations sometimes just go on autopilot and sometimes they just continue to live their life as if nothing's happening. I know some people who crumble and buckle and falter under pressure and falter under trauma and don't handle it well. And there are some people who in a flight or fight situation, they fight back and they act as a hero. So maybe that's what Lorenz was doing. Maybe he was in shock, he was on autopilot, and that's why he was so nonchalant. Maybe he even kicked into fight or flight response and went to go look for his son Joseph after realizing that, hey, my child could be murdered right now. The police questioned Lorenz extensively, but they were unable to conclusively place Lorenz at the crime scene. With Lorenz eliminated as a suspect, the police moved on to their second theory of who it could be, which is Carl Gabriel, Victoria's first husband. As I said at the beginning of this episode, there's a bit of a hitch in the plan. Carl Gabriel died in World War I, a decade before. A lot of troop members for Carl actually attested to seeing his dead body, so there goes suspect number 2. We're going to get into a third theory right now, and this theory is messed up and it is highly disturbing. It is said that Andreas and Victoria were in an incestuous relationship, and in fact, Joseph was Andreas's son. Apparently, 7 years before the murders, Andreas and Victoria were convicted of incest in 1915. Victoria served 1 month in jail for the crime, while Andreas was sent away for an entire year. And Andreas's propensities for incest and abuse and violence was frequently discussed in the neighboring town, and supposedly Andreas had other children with Cecilia besides Victoria, but she was the only one who had survived Andreas's violent hands into adulthood. However, I'm going to say with the brutality of Andreas's injuries, there is no way that he could have inflicted that upon himself. It would have been impossible. Now, there's a theory I saw on Reddit and other parts of the internet that Andreas is in fact the killer and that his injuries were self-inflicted because he shot himself with a rifle or a shotgun. However, I never saw that there was a gun found next to the bodies. I did say items removed from the search party, but a gun was never one of them. Now, it's not impossible to think that in 1922 Germany, the Gruber family would own a rifle or shotgun on the farm. Now, I'm going to mention Anton Gump and Adolf Gump, two brothers, Karl Schreier and Andreas Schreier, two other brothers, as well as Anton Beichler and Karl Beichler. Yes, another pair of brothers, so we have 3 pairs of brothers, because they are also heavy suspects in the Hinterkaifeck murder. There's not a ton of evidence behind these 6 being the killers. A lot of their evidence is speculation and statements from other witnesses implying some of these men could have been the murderers. I highly recommend you go and read about them, because some of them are placed on the farm around the murders. But again, there wasn't any hard evidence like with Lorenz or Andreas. Lorenz was cleared, Karl was cleared, and Andreas, although he is still suspected, gonna say he's also been cleared because of his injuries. So who killed the Gruber family? Was it paranormal? There is a paranormal theory, and this gets into why the previous maid left the family and why Maria Baumgartner took over as maid for the Gruber family. The previous maid, Crescenz Reiger, left the Gruber family 6 months prior to the attack because she had said she believed the farm was haunted. She worked on the farm too from 1920 till about September 1921 on the Hinterkaifeck farm. The police questioned Crescenz, and she said that she heard footsteps up in the attic, that she heard voices up there, and she had that unsettling feeling that she was constantly being watched. Now, the former maid's story of hearing stuff in the attic was also kind of corroborated by Andreas himself, because he allegedly admitted that he also heard noises up in the attic. However, whenever he went to go look up there, he never found a single thing. He never found anybody up there. Now, this theory gets spookier because Andreas said that he found a pair of footsteps in the snow leading from the woods into the machine house of the farm. There was never any footsteps found leading out from the machine house or from the farmhouse back into the woods. I am going to say who I think the murderer is, and I think it's actually in our third theory where we find out who the killer of the Gruber family is. I don't think it's paranormal. I think it's actually more sinister than that. In 2025, it's not uncommon to hear stories of people finding out that they have a squatter or squatters living in their house. And with all the technology we have in 2025, I don't think it's weird to say that the Gruber family had a squatter living on their farm in 1922. Let's take a look at why I believe a squatter killed the Gruber family. Number 1, the footsteps in the snow. It's February 1922 in Germany. I'm sure it's cold out. It's not unreasonable to say that there was somebody in the forest who decided to go warm up on the farm. Seeing that it is a farm, they probably thought there would be plenty of areas for them to hide. My second piece of evidence for this theory is the maid saying she heard noises. And well, I believe that she believed that she heard noises. If there is a squatter living on the farm, it wouldn't be weird to think that the squatter's moving around in the attic, or that the squatter's watching her out of interest or boredom. And of course, they're probably going to be making some noises. My third piece of evidence for this is how the family was found on the farm. Every single member of the family was covered up. This shows a sign of remorse of the killer killing their victim. According to Joshua Reynolds and Victoria Estrano Reynolds from Stockton University, and Scott Fang and Sean McCrea from the University of Wyoming, they state in their research paper investigator beliefs of homicide crime scene characteristics, and it will be linked down below. Covering the body indicates that the perpetrator is remorseful. Covering the body does not necessarily indicate that the perpetrator had a close relationship with the victim, but it is generally believed to be an indicator of the perpetrator having some prior relationship with the victim. I believe that the Gruber family was killed by a squatter on the farm. I know it's maybe a little anticlimactic when you have some prime suspects, but I believe that what happened was somebody was living on the farm. Somebody got attached to the Gruber family. This squatter maybe started to believe that they were a member of the Gruber family. I think that one day on March 31st, they were found by one member of the family. And being found, they didn't want to get arrested or potentially killed by the family for squatting on their property. In an act of not knowing what to do, they murdered the first member of the family. And then they murdered all the other members of the family to try to silence any potential witnesses. With the bodies being covered up, I think that this person had remorse for killing the family because they had somewhat grown close to the family. Also, all the animals on the farm were taken care of. This shows that they had some type of attachment to the farm animals. I know that it's not a cat or dog, and that sometimes farmers have a different relationship with their farm animals, but they still love and cherish them and see them as family members. Now, the Hinterkaifeck farm murder is still a mystery that hangs around in 2025, and unfortunately, it will never be solved. Or did it get solved? In 2007, students from the Fürstenfeldbruck Police Academy actually opened up the investigation to the Hinterkaifeck murders. But unfortunately, with evidence becoming lost and eyewitnesses all being dead at this point, they quickly had to shelve the case. You see, the team actually did agree on a theory and they did have a suspect. However, they are not going to share who the suspect is out of respect to the descendants of their suspect. And so with that, we come to the conclusion of the Hinterkaifeck murders. We may never know who killed the Gruber family and their maid Maria. Honestly, I highly recommend that you go and do research on Hinterkaifeck yourself. All my resources will be in the description below so you can double check them. But there's still a lot to this murder that I just didn't put in the script, as I kind of stated earlier. There's a lot of weird things that happened with the family and their untimely death. One of the weirdest things that happened was actually the heads to the family went missing because at one point investigators brought the individual heads of the family members to clairvoyance to try to communicate with the dead family, and the heads were just never recovered. There's stuff like that is interesting, but I ultimately didn't think it really enhanced the story, or maybe it was just a little too silly to put in. And again, there's tons of stuff to go and read about, especially with some of the other suspects. Thank you for watching. Thanks for hanging around and learning about the Hinterkaifeck murders. I've been Conrad Iacobellis, and I will see you in the next episode. And to give you a little hint on what it is, he's been watching you this entire time.